My sister's $110,000 lie backfired when I played a video that destroyed her marriage. I never expected my own family to turn on me, not like this, not in front of hundreds of people on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my sister's life. But that's exactly what happened. I'm Nathan, 30, and up until recently I thought my relationship with my sister, Melissa, 28, was at least functional. We weren't best friends, but we weren't enemies either. She had always been the golden child, the one my parents fawned over while I had to work my way through everything. But despite that, I never held any deep resentment toward her. At least, I thought I didn't. Her wedding was set to be an extravagant event. Melissa had always loved the spotlight, and her wedding was the perfect excuse to indulge in every over-the-top fantasy she had ever dreamed of. Lavish floral arrangements, a venue that looked straight out of a magazine, and enough catered food to feed a small country. No expense was spared, and it was obvious that my parents had poured a ton of money into making sure their little princess had her perfect day. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, fully prepared to be nothing more than a supportive brother for the day. I didn't have a huge role in the wedding, but I was happy to be there. And for the first few hours, everything seemed fine. Then, just before the ceremony, everything changed. I was standing near the reception hall, chatting with some extended family I hadn't seen in years, when I noticed my mother walking toward me at full speed. Her expression was thunderous, eyes sharp with something I couldn't quite place, until she opened her mouth. "Where is it?" she hissed, her voice low but full of venom. I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Where's what?" Her eyes narrowed and she took another step closer. "Don't play dumb, Nathan. Melissa's wedding money. The $110,000. Where is it?" I laughed. I thought it was some kind of joke. $110,000? What the hell are you talking about? Her face didn't budge. She was serious. And then Melissa appeared, her wedding dress pristine, her face the exact opposite. Tear-streaked, furious, and shaking with anger. "The money is gone," she shrieked. "And you were the last person near the bridal suite." The sheer insanity of what she was saying didn't register at first. I had been near the bridal suite earlier, yeah, but so had a dozen other people, bridesmaids, vendors, and random guests floating in and out. I had zero reason to take anything, let alone a six-figure sum. Before I could even process the accusation, my dad appeared beside them, his face grim. "Nathan," he said, his tone softer but no less condescending, "if you needed money, you could have asked. There was no need for this." And just like that, the full weight of what was happening crashed down on me. They actually believed it. Before I could even defend myself, I felt the shift in the room. Conversations had stopped. Heads were turning. People were staring. The whispers had already begun, a ripple effect of suspicion and judgment spreading through the guests like wildfire. Melissa glared at me, her eyes burning with betrayal. "I can't believe you'd do this to me on my wedding day." I had never felt so blindsided in my life. And that's when I realized it didn't matter what I said. They had already made up their minds. They had already decided I was guilty. I felt like I had stepped into some twisted alternate reality. One minute I was just another guest at my sister's wedding, sipping overpriced champagne and making small talk. The next, I was being publicly accused of stealing over $100,000 with absolutely zero evidence. And the worst part? No one even hesitated before believing it. Melissa stood there, her breath coming in shaky gasps, looking at me like I had just burned her wedding dress in front of her. My mom? She looked devastated, clutching her pearls like the world was collapsing. And my dad? He just sighed like he had been expecting this from me. The sheer audacity of it all was so mind-numbing that for a second I actually laughed. "Are you guys serious?" I asked, looking between them. "You actually think I stole from you?" Melissa's voice cracked with emotion, but the rage still burned in her eyes. "You were the last one in the bridal suite. The money was there before, and now it's gone." I exhaled sharply, trying to keep my temper in check. "Melissa, there were tons of people in and out of that room today. Your bridesmaids, the photographer, the freaking caterers, but sure, let's go ahead and assume that your own brother robbed you blind." My mom stepped forward, lowering her voice but somehow making it even worse. "Nathan, sweetheart, if you took it, we can handle this quietly. Just tell us where it is and we won't press charges." I choked on my own breath. "Press charges? You're joking," I said, shaking my head. My dad sighed. "We just need to resolve this, son. It doesn't have to be a big deal." Oh, but it already was. Because the entire room was watching now. A literal audience to my public humiliation. I turned to Melissa, my patience snapping. "Do you even hear yourself right now? You're accusing me of ruining your wedding, of stealing six figures. Based on what? The fact that I was in the general vicinity of a room." Her hands clenched at her sides. "But I wasn't finished. You know what's funny?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "I make more money than both of you combined. Why the hell would I need to steal from you?" That one hit. I saw the flicker of doubt flash across her face. but she stomped it down almost instantly. She didn't want the truth. She wanted a villain. And apparently I was the easiest option. The whispers were getting louder now. Guests were shifting, some pretending not to listen, others outright gawking at the scene unfolding. I spotted my aunt in the corner, shaking her head in disappointment. Some of my cousins were whispering to each other, sneaking quick glances at me like they were already convinced I was a thief. And then I saw him, Ethan, the groom. He had been standing back the whole time, watching the chaos unfold with a strange expression on his face. Not anger, not shock, but something else entirely. And that's when it hit me. Something about this felt off. A weird feeling settled in my gut. Ethan, my sister's brand new husband, was just standing there watching. No outrage, no frustration, not even the fake supportive fiancé energy I would have expected. Just waiting. And that's when something clicked. If my sister was truly devastated about the missing money, if my parents were genuinely convinced that I had taken it, why wasn't Ethan more involved? This was his wedding, too. Shouldn't he be demanding answers? Shouldn't he be just as furious? Instead, he was standing on the sidelines, his arms folded, his face unreadable. And suddenly, I wasn't just annoyed. I was suspicious. Melissa was still sniffling dramatically, dabbing at her eyes while everyone around her murmured about what a horrible betrayal this was. My mom was whispering to my dad, likely about how this would look to the guests, while my cousins were watching like they had front row seats to a disaster movie. I took a deep breath and turned to Ethan. "What do you think?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" I gestured vaguely at the absolute circus around us. "About all this. About me stealing from you and Melissa. You believe it?" He hesitated, just for a split second. And that was all I needed. Melissa didn't notice. My parents were too busy playing the grieving family act to notice. But I saw it. That tiny flicker of hesitation. The quick glance toward Melissa before he forced himself to nod. "Of course," he said. "The money is gone. And you were, in the room." A weak answer. A too careful answer. If Ethan truly believed I had stolen from them, he would have been just as angry as my sister. He would have been demanding my head. Instead, he was picking his words carefully, like a man trying not to say something he'd regret, like a man who knew something but wasn't saying it. My stomach tightened. I turned back to Melissa. "Where exactly was the money?" She sniffed. "It was in the bridal suite in a secure envelope inside my bag. I checked it an hour before, and it was there. Then, when I went back after the photos, it was gone." "And who else knew it was there?" I asked. She frowned. "What does that matter? We know you were the last one near the room." I let out a sharp laugh. "So were your bridesmaids. So was the wedding coordinator. So was Ethan." Her face froze for a second. Just for a second. And then she recovered, her expression twisting. "Don't try to deflect, Nathan. Just admit what you did." But now, I wasn't just angry. I was sure. Melissa wasn't looking for the money. She was looking for a scapegoat. And suddenly I had a very good idea of why. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Melissa was still playing the victim. My parents were still glaring at me like I had committed a crime. And the guests were eating up the drama like it was part of the wedding entertainment. But the real show, that was happening between Melissa and Ethan. The moment I mentioned his name, the shift was subtle, but I caught it. Melissa's defensiveness spiked. Ethan's posture stiffened. Neither of them expected me to question him, and now that I had, I could see the cracks forming in their perfect little act. I turned back to my sister, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Melissa, do you actually want to find out who took the money? Or do you just want someone to blame?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "You're unbelievable. I'm serious," I continued unfazed. "If you think I stole from you, then prove it. Check the security footage. Call the police. Do something other than just pointing fingers at me." She froze. And that was when I knew for sure. She didn't want a real investigation. She didn't want security involved. Because she already knew who took the money. My mom stepped in, shaking her head. "Nathan, honey, let's not turn this into a bigger mess than it already is, eh?" I cut her off. "No, Mom. You were ready to accuse me in front of everyone here, to drag my name through the mud. So let's get to the truth, shall we?" The guests were murmuring now, shifting uncomfortably. This wasn't just some minor family drama anymore. This was turning into a full-blown scandal. And then finally Ethan spoke. "Melissa," he said, his voice tight, "maybe we should it." She spun toward him so fast it was like she had been electrocuted. "Don't you dare," she hissed under her breath. Oh. Oh. I wasn't the only one who caught that. My dad's eyebrows furrowed. Some of the guests nearest to us exchanged wide-eyed glances. I took a slow step forward, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "You know exactly what happened to that money, don't you?" I said, looking straight at her. Melissa's breath hitched. "Of course not." Ethan wouldn't look at her. His eyes were locked on the floor, his jaw tight. My stomach flipped. There was no way. No freaking way. But before I could say another word, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Hey, I think you guys might want to see this." We all turned to see one of the groomsmen holding up his phone with a video playing. And just like that, the entire wedding went up in flames. The entire room went silent as the groomsman held up his phone. My heart pounded as I watched the video on his screen, grainy, taken from the side, but clear enough to see everything. And there, on full display, was Melissa standing in the bridal suite. With Ethan. And in the video? Melissa was handing Ethan the envelope. The same envelope that supposedly held the $110,000. I heard gasping from the guests. My mother visibly paled, clutching my father's arm like she was about to faint. And Melissa? She looked like she had been hit by a truck. Ethan froze. His mouth opened slightly, then snapped shut as if he had just realized how bad this looked. I slowly turned to my sister, my voice eerily calm. "You want to explain this?" Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, for some kind of lifeline, but there wasn't one left. The groomsman smirked. "I was just taking random videos, capturing moments, you know? Didn't think I'd end up recording this." Melissa looked like she was going to throw up. Then Ethan cracked first. His hands shot up. Okay. Look, it's not what it looks like." The crowd erupted into murmurs. Someone actually laughed. I folded my arms. "Oh? Because it looks like my sister gave you a large sum of money just before the wedding." Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to Melissa, who was still standing there like a statue. "Finally," she snapped. Her voice came out sharp, panicked. "It was for us. Okay. For our future. I was just making sure Ethan had control over it before everything started." I stared at her. "You're saying you gave him the money for safekeeping?" Melissa nodded aggressively, jumping on the excuse like it was the last life raft on a sinking ship. "Yes. Exactly. I didn't steal it. It was ours." But Ethan's face told a different story. He wasn't nodding. He wasn't agreeing with her at all. And that's when I saw it, the guilt. It hit me like a truck. He wasn't supposed to get caught. Melissa thought he had the money safe somewhere, but Ethan? Ethan wasn't planning on telling her the truth. Oh. I took a slow step forward, locking eyes with my soon-to-be brother-in-law. "Where's the money, Ethan?" He visibly tensed. Melissa whipped around, her voice sharp. "Yeah. Ethan, where is it?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his breath coming faster now. "Look, Melissa, I was gonna..." And then she knew. Her face drained of color. The realization hit her like a brick to the chest. She had been played. Ethan had taken the money. And he had never planned on keeping it safe. I had been the scapegoat. But the real betrayal? Was happening right in front of her. Melissa's hands started shaking. No, that's not possible." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the room was so silent that everyone heard it. Ethan wouldn't meet her eyes. I could actually see the panic setting in, the way his hands fidgeted, the way his jaw tensed like he was trying to come up with a last-minute escape plan. But there wasn't one. Because everyone was watching now. And Melissa? She was finally realizing the truth. She spun toward him, her dress swishing aggressively, her voice rising. "Ethan, tell me you still have the money." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, babe, Where is it?" More whispers spread through the guests. Someone gasped audibly. Even my parents, who had been so sure of my guilt, were now looking horrified. Ethan hesitated too long. Melissa's breath hitched. "Oh my God. You spent it, didn't you?" And there it was. The truth written all over his face. Ethan had been planning something behind Melissa's back this entire time. The money had never been safe. It had never even been intended for them as a couple. It was his escape plan. Melissa's body went rigid. "I gave you that money for us." Ethan flinched, confirming everything. Melissa let out a sharp, unhinged laugh. "You were going to leave me." More murmurs. More gasps. Ethan took a step back, his hands up like he could somehow defuse the situation. "Melissa, listen, You were going to leave me." Her scream echoed through the reception hall. I stood there, watching, arms crossed. For the first time, I didn't feel angry at her anymore. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just felt sorry for her. Because Melissa had orchestrated her disaster. She had chosen this. She had handed everything to the one person who had actually been planning to screw her over the whole time. And now? Now it was too late to take it back. Ethan shook his head quickly. "Melissa, baby, let's just get out." She lunged at him, shoving him hard in the chest. He stumbled back, caught off guard. The guests collectively inhaled, watching as the bride, still in her expensive wedding gown, was physically kicking her husband out of their wedding. Ethan's face flashed with embarrassment as he realized he had no way to talk his way out of this. He turned on his heel and bolted toward the exit. The doors slammed behind him. And just like that, the wedding that was supposed to be the most glamorous event of the year had turned into a public catastrophe. Melissa stood there, chest heaving, mascara streaking down her face. Then, slowly, she turned to look at me. And for the first time that day, she looked ashamed. Melissa stood there, trembling, her wedding dress now a symbol of humiliation instead of celebration. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time ever, I saw it real shame. The same sister who had spent years looking down on me, who had just publicly accused me of theft, now stood before me as the real fool. The wedding was in ruins. The guests were either whispering in hushed disbelief or flat-out gawking. My parents? They looked like they were still trying to process everything, their faces pale with shock. Melissa finally opened her mouth, her voice shaky. Nathan. I held up a hand. Don't. She swallowed, her hands gripping the fabric of her dress so tightly that her knuckles turned white. You were so quick to believe the worst about me, I continued, my voice steady but cold. You let everyone think I was a thief. You didn't even hesitate. Melissa winced, looking away. I was your scapegoat, I said. Because deep down you already knew something was off. You just didn't want to admit that the problem was the guy you were about to marry. She didn't deny it. And honestly, I didn't need her to. I had already won. The guests had seen everything. My reputation? Cleared. Her perfect image? Shattered. And Ethan? Gone. There was nothing left for her to say that would fix this. My dad cleared his throat, stepping forward hesitantly. Son, I think we owe you an apology. I gave a humorless laugh. You think? My mom placed a hand on my arm. Nathan, sweetheart, we were just... I took a step back. You were just what? So desperate to believe Melissa's perfect world wasn't falling apart that you threw me under the bus? That's not protecting family. That's just being blind. My parents had no excuse. Melissa opened her mouth again, struggling for words, but I didn't care anymore. I turned on my heel and started walking away. Nathan, wait, she called, but I didn't stop. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. I was just done. Done being the family disappointment when I had done nothing wrong. Done with their toxic favoritism. Done with people who would rather tear me down than see the truth. As I walked out of the wreckage that was supposed to be the biggest day of Melissa's life, I realized something. I was finally free. Free from their judgments. Free from their expectations. Free from ever having to prove myself to them again. And honestly, that was better than any apology they could ever give. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.